Ankita, you start.
Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to all of you to our second day program on the occasion of World Environment Day. I am Ankita, a visiting postdoctoral research scholar at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai, India, and a member of the Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter. Today, we assemble here for the second day program on the regional impacts of climate change in India on the occasion of World Environment Day. Our previous discussion was on 4th of June 2022. Before approaching our panel today, I would like to request Suman to speak a few lines for a brief elaboration on BSS activities and the motive of today's program. So over to Suman.
Thank you, Ankita. Hello, everyone. I am Shuman Kondu, a postdoctoral research scholar in the Dublin City University, Ireland. I am a member of the Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter. On behalf of our organization, I welcome you all to the online discussion on the regional impacts of climate change in India, celebrating the World Environment Day. Before starting the discussion, I would like to shortly brief you about the Breakthrough Science Society. The science organization, Breakthrough Science Society, was established in the year 1995 as a platform to create new science movement in the country. The Breakthrough Science Society is a non-profit social welfare organization focused to eradicate the pseudo-scientific mindset and spread scientific temperament in the society. Breakthrough Science Society aims to cultivate scientific and logical faculty of mind, to foster consciousness against the unscientific beliefs, superstitions, fanaticism, communalism, casteism, etc., to disseminate and popularize different discoveries and advancement in science, to cultivate the study of history and philosophy of science, to inculcate ethical values and social responsibility in all fields of scientific endeavor, to devise and introduce a correct method of teaching and learning science, to conduct campaigns for the introduction of a secular, scientific, and democratic education policy, and to move for the introduction of pro-people government policies in the regard to research, development, and application of science and technology for the benefit of the people, to build up movement for the socialization of natural resources and for the correct use of science and technology to ensure the sustainable development and protection of the environment, and to fight against the misuse of science which goes against the interests of the society. As you know, we are facing consequences of the climate change which cannot be ignored anymore. Since the 1800s, human activities, government policies, and gross ignorance have been the main reasons for the climate change. Taking opportunity of the World Environment Day, which was observed on June 5th throughout the world, aiming to spread awareness among the common people about the issues regarding the environment, policies, and our initiative to save the environment, we'd like to remind again that as a part of the Indian science community, we need to make people aware of the bad practices followed in many generations affecting nature, climate, and it is the high time to become actively involved in stopping these activities which cause harm to the climate. We also emphasize actively realizing the critical state of the present environment, taking steps on a personal and societal level to preserve it, and making or getting involved in the communities to develop environmental safety measures. With this objective, we are going to listen today about the region-wise impacts of the climate change in India. What's the present scenario and what we can do to make it better, and how we can spread the awareness. Talking about the conduction of today's webinar, we'll be listening to 5 speakers for 12 minutes each, and then we'll take the questions from the audience. Please write your questions in the Zoom chat box or in the YouTube chat box if you're following our program on YouTube. We shall pass them to our speakers to answer them at the end. With that, I quickly introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Our first speaker is Moinak Mondol, who is a visiting postdoctoral research scholar at Newark University, Abu Dhabi, UAE, and a member of BSS Abroad, followed by Ayush De, a PhD student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel, and a member of BSS Abroad. Then by Moyuk Roy Choudhury, a PhD student at the Texas A&M University, Texas, USA, and a member of BSS Abroad, followed by Komudi Bikash Goswami, a postdoctoral research scholar at Raman Research Institute, Bangalore, India, and a member of BSS Abroad. And our last speaker will be Srivatsava Vishwanatha, a PhD student at the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia, Barcelona, Spain, and a member of BSS Abroad. With this, I hand over the program to Ankita.
Thanks a lot, Suman. Now let's start the discussion for today. I will request our first speaker, Moinak, to start the talk, and he will be speaking on the Himalayan region. While he shares his slides, here is a gentle reminder for all of us. Please note that we are not taking any questions right now, but I request our viewers and listeners on all the platforms to kindly write the questions in the Zoom chat box or in the comment section of the YouTube live, and we will definitely take those at the question answer session, and we'll direct them to the speakers and the experts for today. So first, let's welcome Moinak for the talk.
Thank you, Ankita and Suman. I'll be speaking on the effects of climate change on Himalayan region. So without further ado, let me share my screen. Oh, sorry. So I would start with the topic climate change. These days we've been hearing a lot about climate change, and most of us has some kind of knowledge what it is, and but I want to throw some lights from a different perspective. So climate change is happening, it is real, and it's been happening since the Industrial Revolution. And there is no way to deny this. But what is causing the climate change? If you ask a high school student or anybody, they would say it's the effect of the greenhouse gases. And the greenhouse gases is trapping the heat that is coming from the sun. So now let's take a step back and ask the question again, where these greenhouse gases are coming from. So we can say it's coming from the burning of fossil fuels and the other gases that we produce. But one thing we need to keep in mind that its greenhouse effect is very natural, and it's been happening since the earth is formed. Even the water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, not gas, but it's an element for the greenhouse effect. But since starting of early 21st century, scientists have found that there is a steep rise in the global mean temperature. And this rise has been unprecedented. If we take the temperature record from various other sources, like different microorganisms and the radiocarbon dating, we found that for the past 10,000 years, we haven't seen this unprecedented increase in temperature that we saw in just last 50 years. But it's not the temperature that we're concerned about, but it's the rate at which the temperature is increasing. So why are we so concerned? Well, the temperature, the rate at which the temperature increased for the past 20 years, it used to happen over a period of 8 to 10,000 years. So we can imagine how fast and how rapidly we are changing our environment. It took a while to convince the scientific community that this is not natural, but it's caused by human. And the way it was conveyed is by doing a lot of numerical simulations. Unfortunately, we cannot predict the future, but we can simulate the future. And by simulating, we crunch a lot of numbers in a supercomputer, and then we predict the future state of a system. So in order to predict the future state of a system, we start with the initial state. And what all the scientists in the last Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change 6th assessment report has shown is that there is no doubt that this changes that we can see is purely man-made. But how do they do that? Well, they started with an initial state. By that I meant there are a lot of data points that is coming from different sources, like different observatories as well as satellite data. And they put all the numbers and they put it on a grid, and that covers the entire globe. And then what they do is they would interpolate all those data over all those grid points. And then they would run the model, and then the model would evolve. And then they would have data for the subsequent years. So you have one set of data that is being produced through crunching numbers, and the other set of data which we have observed. And then there is another way, which is called the reanalysis, where you merge these two data and you change certain biases, how the model is evolving. And with all those bias corrections, they have found that if you exclude all the natural effects, then the world would have been at least 5 degrees cooler in the next century. So otherwise, we are increasing the temperature, and there are a lot of consequences. So as my today's talk is on Himalayan climate, I will focus on why Himalayan climate is so special, and what are the concerns here. So I will move on to my next slide. So this is on the 6th assessment report, and this all those the orange dots you can see are the regions where around the globe you have all those mountains. And we are focusing on this part. This is the Hindu Kush and Karakoram region, and this part is the Himalayan region. So what this assessment report is telling us as of now is that in the rate at the rate at which we are emitting all those greenhouse gases is close to the 8.5 RCP 8.5 scenarios, and this is a representation of the particulate matter, like all those gases and all those elements that is causing the greenhouse effect. And what we see here is that if we keep releasing all those gases at the same rate that we are doing now, we are going to see almost at like 20 to 30% less snow cover. there would be huge amount of increase in the river runoff for the next 20 to 30 years. And then there would be a sudden drop in the runoff in the following years. And most of the snow cover region is going to get depleted. So why it's happening and what are what are the data that we already have gathered? So the Himalayan region can be subdivided into mainly 3 categories. The Western Himalayas, the central part of the Himalaya as shown in the red, and then the eastern part of the Himalaya as shown in the orange. I'm not going to discuss the other part like Tibetan Plateau and the Karakoram region, but this is a very recent paper, and what they did is they studied the mass balance in Himalayas. Now, what is this mass balance? Well, in Himalayas, all those mountain tops are snow-capped. And why it is snow-capped? Well, there is one way. There are precipitation happening, that is snowfall at that high latitude. And then at the same time, there are all those glaciers that are sliding down. And at the lower part, there are, during summertime, those, the snow, they melt and they form river streams. In an ideal scenario, all those mass, I mean the ice mass, should be in a balance, like the amount of deposition of snow should be equal to the runoff. Unfortunately, we have seen that in most of the central and the eastern part of Himalayas, there is a severe decay in the ice cover. And but the most vulnerable, I would say, is around the West Nepal region. So this is evident that this Himalayan snow cover is decreasing. And this Himalayan region is very strategic from a geopolitical perspective. And it's also very important because it has a lot of biodiversity inside the Himalayan region. And most importantly, it serves as a freshwater resource. So let me go into a little bit detail on the processes that is happening around Himalayas. So if you look at the Himalayan region, the Himalayan region is mostly getting all the moisture or the rainfall by the Indian summer monsoon and Indian winter monsoon. The western part of the Himalayas mostly get precipitation in the form of snow, and that is coming from the Indian winter monsoon, where if you go to the eastern side, most of the precipitations are coming in the form of rain, and it's caused by the Indian summer monsoon. Now, the total rainfall or the total precipitation is covering almost 2.76 million square kilometers, and that is creating a watershed for around 1 billion people who are getting benefited from all the waters that are coming from the Himalayan region. But for the past couple of decades, there is a trend in the Indian summer monsoon as well as the Indian winter monsoon. The Indian winter monsoon sometimes get sudden disturbances, which is known as the western disturbances, And most of the moisture that comes in the form of snow is actually coming from the Mediterranean Sea and from the West Atlantic. And all those moistures are coming from at a very high altitude. And what we have found in recent years that as the human is releasing a lot of aerosols in the atmosphere, this aerosols acts as a condensation nuclei. But what is condensation nuclei? There are a lot of moisture vapor in the atmosphere, but the moisture vapor can form droplet around certain nuclei or certain particles. And when the droplets are formed, they release the latent heat. Because of all the pollutants, the mid-troposphere is getting huge amount of this carbon CCN or the condensation nuclei. And because of all those formation of droplets, the mid-troposphere region is getting warmer. And this warming of the mid-troposphere is tampering with both the Indian summer and Indian winter monsoon. In a nutshell, Indian summer monsoon is becoming more erratic and there are less total rainfall, but the rainfall is more concentrated and sudden. And for the Indian winter monsoon, it's barely precipitating. So what is happening is we are losing ice. So when we lose ice, what happens? Well, we all those ice covers, they are white in color. Because they are white in color, they can reflect a lot of heat, all the radiative heat. When you have less snow cover, that means all those radiative heat that would have been reflected is now getting absorbed. So it's a positive feedback loop for the warming. The warming is causing less snow cover, and the less snow cover is absorbing more heat. The second problem with that is, as with the warming and more snow melt, the river runoff is getting increased. And so year by year, we see a lot of flash floods, a lot of cloud microbursts, and there are huge flow in the river. But because this snow cap or the precipitation or all those all those water storage is limited, we could face a severe water shortage. So what would be the impacts of that? As the temperature is increasing, the precipitation is getting erratic, the snow line is receding, and all the trees that would have grown at lower altitude is now propagating upward. That means the tree line is increasing. With increasing human activities, most of the forests are getting destroyed, and all the tree lines that is propagating upward, the productivity of those plants are no longer what it used to be the same. So the total absorption power of carbon dioxide is reduced. And because of the changing ecosystem, there are a lot of species that is immigrating to a region, and it's tampering the balance of the ecosystem. And certain species is becoming invasive, and there are a lot of species that is getting extinct. The next big problem would be the water shortage. As I just mentioned, the Himalayan region is serving water for around 1 billion people through the different river catchments. And when this water is also the fresh water. And when we are depleted of all the fresh water, there would be a severe catastrophe. And because of this erratic rainfall, we have landslides. We also are very greedy. We made different bridges and we put up hydroelectric powers, and all those has not been done strategically, and it's degrading the land. It's also destroying the ecosystem. So with all those erratic events, it's topped by the extreme events. As we can see nowadays, the frequency of cyclones is getting increased, and with higher frequencies of cyclone, there are a lot of damages and infrastructures. And when there are damages in the infrastructure, all the states and the neighboring countries are getting into conflict with each other because the natural resources are becoming very, very limited. So this is a realistic scenario, and there is no way we can paint a very promising, better future. However, in this present sixth assessment report, the IPCC has also mentioned that it's not a doomsday yet. So they mentioned that if we can reduce the carbon emission by moving more into the renewable sources of energy, if we preserve trees, we can maintain this rate of increase in the temperature, and we can keep it under 2 degrees centigrade by end of the century. And this is something we should all look forward to and should act accordingly, because otherwise we can clearly say that it's not a very good or promising future we are looking at. With this, I would like to conclude this short talk, but I would like to appeal to all the viewers that Breakthrough Science Society has been campaigning to raise awareness on the danger of climate change and to motivate the common people and to raise the awareness of a climate movement. And so I would urge all the viewers to be a member of our Breakthrough Science Society. And you can also check all the publications, all the descriptions are provided in the link. And thanks for listening. Thank you.
Let's thank Mainak for this insightful and wonderful presentation on the climate change impacts on Himalayan region. With that, we will go to our next panelist, Ayush, who is a PhD student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel, and a member of BSS Abroad. Let's welcome him for his presentation, and he will be speaking on Delhi and Haryana region. Now over to you, Ayush. Please share your slides, and I will request. Sorry, just a little interruption. I will request all of our panelists, if you could kindly finish up your presentations within 12 minutes, that will be really great for our timing of the program. So it's up to you now, Ayush.
Thank you, Ankita. So let me share my screen. I hope it is visible. Yes.
Yes, it's visible, Ayush. Please start.
So hello all. I'm Ayush. I'm a student at the Hebrew University. So I am going to talk about climate change in the Delhi and Haryana region. Now, climate change here has many aspects. One is, as Mainak extensively talked about, the global increase in temperatures, which is also affecting this region. And another aspect that usually gets talked a lot about in the media is the air pollution. So given the limited time we have, I would focus on that aspect. So what are the primary causes of air pollution in this region? There is the geographical cause, which I will get into shortly. Then there is industrial causes. This region, at least Delhi NCR, has a lot of factories around it. Then there is the very widely talked about stubble burning that happens in Punjab and Haryana that affects this region. But also there is the slightly controversial Diwali, which I will come to. Then we have household emissions and transport emissions. On the right, I'm using my mouse as a pointer, so do for mouse. On the right, one can see the distribution of primary causes of pollution in different phases of the year. So it is one can see that during the peak stubble burning phase is when you have open fire being the primary cause. But even during during other phases of this of the year, one does see other aspects such as household emissions being big contributors, and we'll talk about it shortly. So let's first get into the geographical factors. So the idea is that in usually during the monsoon season, the winds from the Bay of Bengal bring monsoon to the mainland, to the Ganges, and later at the end of monsoon, these start to recede back. And when they recede back, they flow from northwest to the southwest, and with that they carry a lot of fine dust from the desertified regions in Rajasthan, parts Pakistan, Afghanistan, and also they bring with them the fumes from the stubble burning incidents in Punjab and Haryana. Adding to this, there is another unique factor in that the Himalayas in the north and the Vindhyachal mountain range in the south forms like a trap. So there is almost no lateral movement of the air. The air can only in the direction of northwest, and that also reduces airflow in one axis. And on top of that, there is this due to the unique geographical topography of this region, a thing that takes there is the inversion effect takes place. What is the inversion effect? So usually in most regions, as you move up away from the ground, there is a gradual decreasing gradient in air temperature. But because of the cold wind, and this maintains circulation, because hot air rises up and cold air comes down, and this makes the air circulate. But due to the cold winds that come from the north, there forms a layer that gets trapped between a layer of hot air on top. So this cold layer prefers, since it's cold and heavier, it prefers to be closer to the ground. Hot air on top just circulates on the top. So this kind of trap forms a trap, and the pollutants here get trapped, and there is no convection of air, and so the pollution stays for a longer time. Now this is a snapshot of different aspects of the weather in Delhi. Let's go through them. The temperature graph is fairly trivial in that in winters we see more hours with lower temperatures and vice versa. Now wind speed. Okay. Now just 1 second. Now wind speed is again where one sees that how in the winter season there is a lower incidence of high speed winds, and this is again contributed to by the lateral wind, by the low lateral winds, by the blockade that Himalayas and Vindhyachal causes. And also the wind direction, there is a heavy bias towards northwest and west, and not much southwest during that season. And also this is the mixing height. The mixing height is basically the height to which the air is trapped. And one sees that we have very low mixing height during the evenings and the mornings. That's also the coldest day, and that is when pollution really peaks. And so, okay, into stubble burning. Let's talk about what are the causes of stubble burning. Now, the first cause one might say has been the recent introduction of combine harvesters. In earlier times, when crop was cut manually, people used the sickle and they would directly chop off the crop from closer to the root. So there wasn't much left over, and it was easy to clean up whatever was left. But ever since combine harvest have been introduced, they usually just chop off the paddy close to the grain, and you have a lot of stock that is left over. Farmers usually prefer to just burn this. And now this has added to this has been a new law that was well intentioned. So the law Punjab Haryana Preservation of Subsoil Water Act that was passed in 2000. So the idea here is that the law was that they put a cap on how early farmers can sow their crop in their kharif crop. I think it was set to 21st June. The idea was to benefit from monsoons that come in August and July. So this would reduce the farmers' dependence on subsoil water and hence help save water. But an unintended consequence of this, that now farmers harvested their crops later than they would have. So this left them much less time to prepare their soil for the next Rabi season, which happens in winter. So burning your crop was a very quick way to burning not your crop but your stock was a quicker way to basically prepare your soil and get rid of the stock. And again, paddy, reliance on paddy. This is again, we have excess stock of paddy in the country, and paddy is one of those crops that usually has long stalks left over that need to be cleaned up. So if we had more variety of crops which were friendly to the soil, we would probably have a better situation. And this is again a correlation graph of one sees that the open fires that happen during the October and November months is very strongly correlated. That coupled with the hours, northwesterly hours in Delhi, correlates well with the share of PM 2.5 levels in Delhi. So both these effects, they go hand in hand and contribute to the smog situation. Now, another aspect, this is something people like to counter. Another aspect is Diwali, and people like to counter this by saying that this has very little. I mean, the emissions from Diwali firecrackers have very little contribution to the overall average PM 2.5 levels of the year, and that is certainly true. But one needs to keep in mind that we need air every day. So even if one day the air is beyond threshold levels, that is enough to cause serious problems, and that is usually what happens. So the graph that we see here is the graph of active 2.5 counters in the city of Delhi. So the monitoring stations that we have usually stop being active after 2.5 concentrations exceed 999 ppm, and one can see that there is a stark drop in the number of active because basically the counters just max out. So there is a stark drop which is in very strict correlation with Diwali hours, especially to the evening when people start burning crackers, and you see the air, all the stations just max out, and this is very strongly, and this is like an order of magnitude more harmful than what would be considered bad air. So, and there are other factors like household emissions, which is quite high. Then again, we have thermal power plants and vehicular emissions, also road dust. And now household emission. Household emissions usually come from the fact that there are there is a large population of people in Delhi and Haryana who do not have a pakka stove. By that I mean the LPG stoves. So people rely on coal and wood a lot, and this is actually, firstly, it's not very efficient thermally. And all, on top, it also has it also is a significant contributor to the emissions. Now health impact. So I decided to pick one particular study. This is done on a group of people who are usually the most affected due to the pollution levels, mainly the people who are out on the streets, the street vendors, the auto rickshaw people, and sweepers. And it has a fairly large sample of around 500 plus people. And one can see that these people suffer from a wide range of symptoms, going from respiratory to ophthalmic, which are eye problems, mucoskeletal problems, back, shoulder ache. Then these people also have skin problems, because skin problems, they have heart problems, and they also suffer from general symptoms like headaches and weakness. And the incidences of these symptoms are usually much higher to them, for these people, than the general population. So one can draw a correlation. One can establish the poor air quality being a cause behind their symptoms, considering they work out in the streets. Now, what can be some possible solutions? One is a mass deployment of happy seeders. Now, what are happy seeders? They are a recent invention. They are machines that in a way cleans up your stocks while you helping prepare manure out of that stock. So they essentially remove the stock from the soil and cut it up into smaller pieces, and this can act as a manure for the upcoming rabi crop. So this will essentially prevent farmers from rather give them incentive to not burn the remaining stock. Also incentivizing other crops, and shifting the more about 2 lakh homeless people around Delhi NCR. This can also be extended to Haryana. So mostly, yes, shifting them to LPG. Also cleaner fuels. Now Delhi has been a front runner in this, and Haryana can take note. Delhi has shifted to CNG, LPG, and also Delhi has a wide availability of BS6 compliant fuels, which are low emission petrol diesels. They have, I think, they emit lower concentrations of nitrous oxide and sulfur and sulfides, not sulfur oxides. And this is something that can then also making separate corridors for trucks and lorries in the NCR region. So this is already implemented, but it can be implemented more thoroughly, in that vehicles that don't necessarily need to enter a city, make them not enter the city, make them like the vehicles moving from the north to, say, the south or the east, they can be made to bypass the city. Also in the mid to long term, maybe encouraging work from home, and also electric vehicles, and long-term shift towards carbon-free resources. And also one thing that can be a policy change of the Delhi government is to switch to a forecast-based system than a ex-post-based system to counter pollution warnings. So what happens now is that Delhi government doesn't really go by the forecasts. They usually act on pollutions like shutting down schools after pollution has really taken place. The Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology actually releases both 10-day and 72-hour PM 2.5 forecasts And as one can see from this graph, it correlates fairly well with the actual monitored PM 2.5 values. So both these forecasts can be used for by the Delhi government for mid-term planning to counter this solution. And these are some studies that I used for this presentation. And now an appeal to all: if you like the kind of event that we are doing, we also do more events like we talk about the scientific temperament in the country, and we try to encourage the youth to pursue a path in science and education. And we share about all what we do on our social media, and we also publish stuff. So this is the link, and also please become a member if you feel so. It's all free.
Okay, so let's thank Ayush for his very informative and insightful presentation on the climate change effects in Delhi and Haryana region. With that, we will go to Mayuk, who is a PhD student at Texas A&M University, Texas, USA. And now Mayuk will present on the climate change effects in Sundarban region. So it's up to you, Mayuk. And again, it's a kind reminder for all of our panelists, rest of our panelists, if you could kindly finish your presentations within 10 to 12 minutes, will be really great. So with that, I will hand over the platform to Mayuk.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, Mayuk. Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, and everyone can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you have to make it full screen mode, maybe, Mayuk.
Yes, I'm doing
now
it.
It works. Please go ahead.
So today I'm here to give a presentation on the effects of climate change in West Bengal, and also discuss how this is impacting the mangrove forests in the south of the state, that's the Sundarbans Delta. To begin with, I will give a short introduction on climate change, and presenters before me has given a much more detailed report or much more detailed explanation on what climate change is and how it's affecting the environment. But I'm just going to give a short presentation on what climate change is, and then I'm going to move on to the main topic of my discussion. So climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle, but since the 1800s or after the Industrial Revolution, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. This has led to a worldwide phenomenon called the global warming, which means that the surface temperature of the Earth is increasing gradually beyond the natural scale. Now, if you look to the right, it shows a heat map of how temperature has changed over the last 50 years. We can see that the rise in temperature between 2011 to 2021 is much more than it did in the years 1956 to 1976. The Earth is actually heating up at a much faster rate than it did 50 years ago. So what are the causes for climate change? The main driver of climate change is the greenhouse effect. Some gases in the Earth's atmosphere act like the glass in a greenhouse, which traps the sun's heat and stops it from leaking back into the space, and in the process causes global warming, which increases the temperature of the entire region. So many of these greenhouse gases occur naturally, and if it was just that, it would have been fine, but human activities have been increasing the concentrations of some of them in the atmosphere, and in particular, they are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases, or CFCs, which has a great potency to trap the heat in the Earth's atmosphere. So carbon dioxide produced by human activities is by far the largest contributor to global warming. By 2020, its concentration in the atmosphere has risen to 48% above its pre-industrial level, that's before 1750. That means in the last 270 years, concentration of CO2 has increased by almost 50% than what it was before 1750. This puts in comparison of how much man-made factors have affected the production of carbon dioxide and emission of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, there are certain causes for these rising emissions. The first one is definitely burning fossil fuels, that's coal, oil, and gas, which produces a lot of carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide. The second reason for the increase in greenhouse gases is actually deforestation or cutting down of forests. Why? Because trees help to regulate the climate by absorbing a lot of CO2 from the atmosphere. And when they're cut down, this beneficial effect is lost, and that adds to the problem. The third one is fluorinated gases, or chlorofluorocarbons, as we say. They are emitted from equipment and products that we use. And such emissions have a very strong warming effect. And actually, they are much more dangerous as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and they are actually 23,000 times. Their warming effect is actually 23,000 times greater than carbon dioxide. So they are very potent as a greenhouse gas. And they are actually present in a lot of the products and equipments that we use nowadays. Excuse me. So now that we have primarily discussed what we mean by climate change, and in addition to global warming, we can move on to the main topic of the discussion, that is how climate change is affecting the population in West Bengal and in the Sundarbans region. This is a picture that was taken right after the cyclone Amphan hit in 2020. And we can see that the devastation it has caused. And we will also look into several other things or several other factors that actually causes a lot more devastation in the regions that the cyclones take place. So one of them. So if like I'm from Kolkata, and we have been quite habituated with this fact that every year the threshold temperature increases a little bit, and we are facing an ever increasing run of high temperatures, at least for the last decade. And a recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the 6th report actually, and has warned that Kolkata has recorded the highest rise in surface air temperature within the studied cities and regions across the world in the span of 1950 to 2018. Warming in the city has increased by 2.6 degrees centigrade, and it's followed by Tehran, where it increased by 2.3 degrees centigrade, and Moscow, where it increased by 1 degree centigrade during this time. So we can see that in the last 70 or 80 years, temperature has increased by 2.6 degrees centigrade, and that is the highest throughout the world. And the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, has actually warned us that the average annual temperature rise could cross the 1.5 degree centigrade threshold by 2026 if we keep a business as usual attitude towards climate change. Otherwise, if we don't make serious efforts to block down those emissions or curb down those emissions, then we can cross the 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold by 2026. This report also predicted that by the end of the century, the city, Kolkata, which is the capital of West Bengal, may experience a temperature of 35 degrees centigrade or more for more than 150 days a year. So that's more than half of the year the city can experience temperatures which is equal to or more than 35 degrees centigrade. Abnormal rise in temperature is not only limited to Kolkata, but the temperature around West Bengal has also crossed 44 degrees centigrade in the past few months. Purulia, at the edge of the Chotanagpur Plateau, has recorded 40 4.3 degrees centigrade, while the neighboring districts of Jhargram, Bankura, and Paschim Bardhaman has also reeled under extreme heat wave conditions, with temperatures above 42 degrees centigrade across the entire region. What that means is the temperatures are around 4.5 to 6 degrees centigrade above the average temperature, which is around 37 degrees usually in the summer months. So this increased temperature throughout West Bengal is actually a big concern for those who are living in West Bengal and in the areas of Sundarbans. So now, as we have talked about the temperature, let's talk about cyclones and cyclone formations along with floods, which we'll talk in the next couple of slides. Bay of Bengal has seen nearly 5 times the number of tropical cyclones than the Arabian Sea in the post-monsoon periods, that's September to December, which is revealed in a long-term analysis of cyclones that struck the coast of India from 1891 to 2018. So Bay of Bengal is actually seeing nearly 5 times as much cyclones as is seen by the Arabian Sea. And this analysis has been released in a report by the Ministry of Earth Sciences of Government of India. The shape of Bay of Bengal makes it much more conducive for storms to gain force, but the rising sea surface temperature makes matters worse by triggering more intense storms. The sea surface threshold temperature for the formation of cyclones is around 28 degrees centigrade, but it is around 30 to 32 degrees centigrade over the Bay of Bengal, which actually is a direct cause for these violent cyclones. So studies have shown that category 3 to 5 cyclones, that's extremely severe or super cyclones, are likely to increase in the Sundarbans. And it will also affect cities like Kolkata and Khulna. Kolkata is just 100 kilometers away from the Sundarban Delta. And it will definitely affect the cities like Kolkata and Khulna unless the emission level is controlled at the earliest. Not only that there will be more cyclones, but these cyclones will rapidly intensify, and gain more power in very short time. That is actually a big concern in recent times. We saw for Amphan in 2020, which rapidly intensified when the wind speed of the storm increased from 140 kilometers per hour to 270 kilometers per hour in just under 18 hours. So why are cyclones intensifying so rapidly? This was not the case for cyclones that happened before. This has been a recent phenomenon. The short answer is human-induced climate change. But the World's Meteorological Organization says that 90% of the heat accumulated by the planet has been absorbed by the oceans, leading to severe rapid rise in temperature of ocean water up to depths of 2,000 meters, which directly contribute to the increase in number of cyclones and their rapid intensification. Upon landfall, these cyclones lead to severe floods, which we'll discuss in the next slides. These are a couple of images from when Amphan hit the coast of Bay of Bengal in West Bengal and the neighboring regions in Bangladesh. And the devastation caused by Amphan was severe. And as what we have seen for cyclones preceding Amphan, the Josh and other cyclones before that, the intensity of these cyclones has kept on increasing, leading to widespread damage. So the largest loss of life comes from the flooding that these cyclones cause, known as storm surge, when seawater is pushed onto the coast. Climate change is actually predicted to worsen these floods as swelling cyclone clouds with more water and rising sea levels that allow these storm surges to be blown further inland. In May 2020, the supercyclone Amphan hit the India-Bangladesh border, bringing heavy rainfall and strong winds and affecting more than 1.3 crore citizens in the area. The cyclone also caused storm surges of 2 to 4 meters and flooding coastal regions of the Bay of Bengal. Amphan had severe consequences for people, agriculture, and the local economy. It tragically resulted in more than 100 to 120 deaths, and I think the real estimated number is more than that, and as well as damaging or destroying homes and power grids, leaving millions without electricity or communication. Floods caused by cyclones damages large areas of crops, and fertile soils are either washed away or contaminated by saline water, rendering them unusable for agriculture. And since most of the rural population of Bengal and the population around Sundarbans mainly rely on agriculture and farming and fishing as their livelihood, these floods do have a devastating impact on their economic lives as well as they are forced to leave their homes and migrate somewhere else. So these are a few pictures from when Josh and Amphan hit the landfall and caused huge floods and devastating floods across West Bengal. So now I'm going to discuss about the socioeconomic impacts that climate change and along with the factors that are induced by climate change have on people. So high temperatures and sustained heat waves will hamper outdoor working ability of the labor force. Estimates suggest that the number of working hours lost due to extreme heat would increase from 10% today to 15 to 20% by 2050, severely affecting economic growth. And a huge population in the cities as well as in the rural areas work in the fields and do manual labor jobs. And that is going to be severely impacted if temperatures continue to increase at an alarming rate as it is doing right now. Reduced fish populations due to rising ocean temperatures will affect livelihoods of millions of people that depend on the fisheries industry. And it has been the case in Sundarbans that the population of fishes has depleted, or the different species of fishes has just disappeared in the last 20 or 30 years, or maybe 40 or 50 years. This also has an adverse impact on students, with schools opting to advance summer holidays due to extreme weather conditions, and certain private schools also have also gone back to an online mode of education, which, as we have all seen by now throughout the entire COVID pandemic, is not an effective replacement for in-person learning that is being held in the schools. It is also not a feasible solution for the rural areas where technology is not as advanced and people cannot afford the cost of moving to an online-based learning mode. By now, every degree rise in surface temperature has been linked to loss in GDP for that particular region. Many reports on climate change have come up with different mathematical models equating GDP loss to increase in surface temperature. Even if we don't take the numbers at their face value, we have to acknowledge the fact that that extreme heat and continuous rise in temperature will result in widespread negative effects in the socioeconomic spectrum of our lives. Now, I'm going to discuss on how this affected the Sundarbans region and how the Sundarbans region is affected through the cyclones and floods and the increase in temperature. So huge losses in life from frequent cyclones and floods that ravage this region. I'm sorry, someone has unmuted their mic. Can you please mute the mic? Okay. So Sundarbans is the world's largest contiguous mangrove forest and is a designated World Heritage Site. Shared by India and Bangladesh, it is home to several species, including tigers and other animals. But due to climate change, Sundarbans faces several challenges with rising sea levels, islands are disappearing, and the increasing salinity in the soil and water has severely threatened the health of the mangrove forests and the quality of soil and crops. Sundarbans is a closed ecosystem where people's livelihood is mainly dependent on agriculture, cattle, fishing, and fishing in the Bay of Bengal. These cyclones have caused huge losses in life, and the floods have also ravaged the region. almost every flood or cyclone causes people to move away and end up in refugee camps.
Hi, Mayuk. I'm sorry to intervene. If you could kindly finish soon, then that would be really great. In another
Yes, I'm
2 to
finishing.
3 minutes. Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
I'm finishing in 2 to 3 minutes. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. So a constant rise in sea level is affecting the overall population. The Sundarbans have already experienced the highest sea level rise in the country, which is nearly double compared to the global average. Already, at least 4 islands have fully submerged, and more than 40,000 people have been forced to relocate from a fifth island, which will also disappear in the coming decade or so. In all, soil erosion will cause at least 8 islands, 7 of them in India, to simply vanish, displacing tens of thousands of people. Floods due to cyclones have often brought a lot of seawater inland, which is saline in nature. It has led to severe agricultural losses and reduction in fertility of the soil. Floods have been responsible for a lot of soil erosion in the area. The fishing industry has also dwindled as the population of fishes have decreased significantly, while once abundant, many species of fishes have all but disappeared. With many people losing everything in the floods, they are forced to move further inland, and many of them end up in cities where they are forced to a life in poverty. Most of these people's livelihoods depended on farming or fishing, and with that gone, they're forced to move further inland, taking up daily wage labor jobs and ending up in slums around the cities. Climate migration or climate migrants is actually a serious problem that we are dealing with right now, and it's only going to increase in the future. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation. It's an appeal from all of us at Breakthrough that those who are in this forum right now, they take a look at what Breakthrough has been doing for over the last several decades. It has been campaigning to raise awareness on the looming danger of climate change in India and organize common people for a movement against climate change and environmental degradation. You can become a member by going to our website at breakthroughindia.org. Join us, and you can also read a lot of our publications at breakthroughindia.org. You can also follow us on all the social media pages on YouTube, All India, and YouTube Abroad, and also on Facebook. Thank you. With that, I want to conclude my speech.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mayuk, for a very informative and wonderful presentation for the Sundarban region. With that, I would go to Kaumudi Vikas Goswami. He is a postdoctoral research scholar at Raman Research Institute, Bangalore, India, and a member of BSS Abroad. Now, Kaumudi will talk about the climate change effects in Karnataka region. Please, Kaumudi, you can go ahead with your presentation. And again, a gentle reminder, kindly restrict your presentations within 10 to 12 minutes for both Kaumudi and Srivatsava. Will be really great. Yeah, up to you now, Kaumudi.
Thanks, Ankita, for the introduction. I'll just share my slide. Is it visible now?
Yes, and you can make it in a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. So are you seeing the presentation now? Or?
Sure. It's perfect. You can go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kaumudi Vikas Goswami. I'm currently a postdoc at Raman Research Institute, Bangalore. So when we talk about Bangalore, pleasant weather comes to mind. That was actually my perception when I first visited that place in 2014. However, in the last 4 months since I have joined RRI, my experience is different. And here comes the topic of today's discussion, climate change in Karnataka. So there are several effects of climate change in Karnataka. So first, I will talk about increasing temperature and how the increment of temperature affected the overall agriculture. So for this, I will refer to this particular article. And With that, I will present these three graphs. So this is a graph that shows overall average temperature change in the coastal region of Karnataka. And you can see that average increasing trend is 0.66 degree for 100 years. And these two are graphs for northern part of Karnataka and southern part of Karnataka. And overall increasing trend is 0.75 degree per 100 years for these cases. So how does increasing of temperature affect agriculture? So I will show these two like particular examples. So we know that crops need a particular threshold of temperature to maintain to properly for proper nourishment. So so in these two cases, say the threshold temperature is 33 degrees centigrade. However, like as you can see, there are like a lot, prolonged number of days where the daily temperature was above 33 degrees centigrade. So particularly you can see in the northern part of Karnataka was affected by this large exposure to high temperature. So these are two following points. And first of all, like there are a large number of days for which the daily temperature was above the threshold, and northern part of Karnataka was exposed to higher number of hot weather. So, and it has been shown in this two like works that this exposure to extreme temperature has negative impact on productivity of wheat growing regions, and this is detrimental to agriculture industry. The other aspect I will talk about is rapid deforestation. So, but I will particularly refer to this work, and so you can see the overall map for like starting from 1973 and how the overall green patch has changed to 2018. You can see in the forest cover the amount of like greeneries has been severely shrunk, and this quantitatively we can give these following numbers, where overall forest cover in Karnataka has reduced from 74.1% in 1973 to 48% in 2018. Particularly, the loss of evergreen forest has been reduced to 24.85% from 56.07% in the span of 1973 to 2018. So what could be the reason for this loss of forest region? So there are several man-made activities. So few particular actions could be construction of dams near Kali River, and that dam was not built without with any particular rehabilitation measures. And there are also like monoculture plantations like eucalyptus, teak, or acacia by forest department. And also like near Kaiga, there was a nuclear power plant. So all these man-made activities amounted to loss of important greeneries in Karnataka. So also we need to talk about increasing amount of drought. So I will particularly use this paper for to talk about statistics for that. Particularly, I'd like to show you this map. If you look at figure B, so you can see that overall rainfall has been in low in decreasing trend. So, for example, if you see in the middle part of like Karnataka, a large section of region which is red is showing decreasing rainfall. On the other hand, if you look at the overall like area that has been affected by drought. So high drought intensity is denoted by this green patch, and you can see more than 80% of Karnataka is affected by high drought intensity. And you look at figure E. So this one shows for 1 year there has been severe drought frequency, and so like overall most of the part of Karnataka is facing like multiple droughts over 1 year, and it has great effect on detrimental effect on agriculture. As you can see in figure G, the return period, that is once the arid land is affected by drought, it takes a large amount of time to become fertile again, and this return period is very low. So this map shows the detrimental effect of drought in most of the part of Karnataka region. In fact, Karnataka is ranked second drought-prone area, and 18 out of 31 districts are highly drought-prone. And there has been consecutive drought occurred in this following years from 2001 to 2004. And about 80% of area of Karnataka is drought prone. And there has been also like rainfall data for rainfall deficit, and these are the following statistics. That is, rainfall deficit of 27% was observed in 2009, 49% was observed in 2012, and 20 to 50% has been observed in 2014. So this has a large socioeconomic impact. That is about, for example, about 80% of total population had to leave their agricultural like activities and join in different other industries, and they have to go outside the village area. And this has significant impact in overall productivity of farming. So also like because of this rapid deforestation and increasing the decline in rainfall affects Kaveri River basin. So I'll refer to this particular work for this. And the following statistics I'd like to mention. That is, over past 40 years, there has been 40% depletion in the Kaveri River basin. And half of the Kaveri River basin suffered from critical groundwater depletion. So 87% of original tree cover has been lost. So that is also like mentioned in the rapid deforestation. And of course, a lot of people are dependent on this like Kaveri River for farming, for agriculture. And so there has been large socio-economic impact of climate change, and the worst of all is increasing suicide rate among farmers. So I will refer this source, and this is the like statistics for farming related causes of suicide. Particularly, I would like to bring these two areas into attention. As you can see, lack of access to irrigation water has caused a lot of like a rapid increase of has been one of the major reasons for suicide. And also there has been increase of cyclone effect, failure of rainfall, drought. So from 2014, like number of people said yes to this result was on an average 17.76, and there has been huge increment to 44.86. And also there has been accidental fires, but you can see like rainfall, drought, or lack of access to irrigation water is causing this unfortunate events, and this is a matter of worry, of course. And here comes the purpose of our Breakthrough Science Society, where we have been actively campaigning to raise awareness of climate change, as well as various other aspects of like scientific temperament and removing Prejudices Cover Society. So I'll urge all of you to become an active member and read the publications which you can access through this link. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kaumudi, for very nice presentation for the Karnataka region. Now we will go to our last speaker for the day, Srivatsava Vishwanatha. He is a PhD student at Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia, Barcelona, Spain, and a member of BSS Abroad. He will speak about the climate change effects in the region of Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, and the Telangana region. Now, the platform is yours, Srivatsava Sri. Please share your slides and.
So are you able to hear me?
Yes.
And the slides in the presentation mode?
It's coming up.
Maybe stop sharing and start sharing again.
Yes, do that.
Yeah, now?
Yes, it's good. Sri, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks Ankita for the kind introduction, and I'll thank everyone first of all who have joined through the various streaming services to listen to what the impact of climate change is in India. And for my part, I'll be talking about how it has affected Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Kerala. So people who have spoken before me, they have given you a very elaborate definition of climate change. So just for you to be refreshed, what I mean by climate change is the change in global or regional climate patterns. And we do have indicators to quantify, to better understand what the impact is in terms of how the climate change is affecting the various populations and the various aspects of our living as well. So these indicators can be divided into two categories: the one that primarily occur in the summer season, and then the one in the rainy season. So when it comes to summer season, I'll be talking about the drought frequency and then the heat waves, whereas when it comes to rainy season, it's the change in monsoon patterns, the tropical cyclone activity that has been very erratic in the recent times, and how that has been leading to the flash and river flooding, which has misplaced millions of people and thereby threatening them to make them homeless. So to better understand that, I will go into the physical geography of the regions I'm interested in. So it's Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Kerala. These are the ones that are situated in the southern part of the Deccan Plateau, and they're flanked by eastern and western Ghats. And since I will be talking about flash floods and then how the torrential rainfall has affected it, so we should equip ourselves with the knowledge of what are the prominent river basins or the water bodies that are present in these two regions. When it comes to Andhra and Telangana, it's Godavari and Krishna. More importantly, the Godavari basin in Andhra Pradesh is where bulk of the agricultural activity happens, and that is where you see the typical coconut trees and the ones that are generating the ones that lead to economic activity in Andhra Pradesh region. Kerala has more than or close to 10 rivers, and rather than naming the rivers, I felt it was important to name the reservoirs, because most of the rivers, they are covering less than 200 kilometers, and the reservoirs are the ones that are feeding most of the population and are able to contain the water, and these are the ones that end up being prone to flash floods and the overflow during the tropical cyclone activity or during the monsoon season. Of them, they are Idukki, Idamalayar, Kallada, Kakki, Malamapula, and whereas the last two, Parambikulam and then Mullaperiyar, these are shared with Tamil Nadu, so it's a bit difficult to understand what is the contribution of each state and how much it has affected each of the provinces. So I'll be focusing only on the first five. So why and what has actually led us to talk about this is that there is a change in patterns of the heat waves. And if you look at how the heat waves have progressed over the years in the various regions of our country, during the 50s and 60s, they were primarily concentrated in the northern region, but with time they have steadily encroaching into the Deccan Plateau and then the southern region, the three provinces I have mentioned. And this is primarily due to the increase in human activity, especially with respect to the deforestation. There is heavy industrialization of these regions, and rather than having mangroves and lush fields, we're now creating concrete jungles. And because of all this, the carbon sinks that were traditionally these trees, these vast greenlands, now they're becoming deserted. Because of that, they're not able to concentrate CO2, which is being ejected into the atmosphere, and thereby leading to increase in the temperatures. And typically when you talk about South India, the Andhra region, Telangana region, the Kerala region, it is the first thing that comes to everyone's mind when we talk about climate change is the increase in temperatures. So let's just see how the summer scenario is in each of the three provinces I'm going to talk about. So what they have seen is that there is an increase in the number of days that have recorded high temperatures in the range of 40 to 45 degrees, and also the maximum temperature that has been recorded in Andhra Pradesh in the 10 district, that has been steadily increasing. And this is primarily affecting the Rayalaseema region, which is the deep interior part of Andhra Pradesh. If I go back into the slide, so we have a coastal belt, and then we have four districts of Rayalaseema, the ones that are interior, and these are the more arid ones, and these are the ones where the industries are located, the iron mines, the coal mines are located. And what's happening is that the threshold for these regions was generally set to be in the range of 40 to 45 degrees, whereas for the rest of the regions, conventionally, the average temperatures during the summers used to be in the range of 35, and an increase in 2-3 degrees centigrade would be considered to be the result of global warming. Whereas in these four districts, which are already affected by the high temperatures of well in excess of 40 degrees, we still see with passing time, there is an increase in the incidence of mandals, which are the collection of certain number of villages, the ones that are declared to be drought, and then that are declared to be heat wave prone. And what this is doing is that the population that lives here are primarily reliant on animal husbandry and then the farming, whereas because of this heat waves and then because of the droughts that are being created, it is this lower sections of the society, the ones that rely on farming and the animal husbandry, that are being disproportionately impacted, and that is what is actually leading to higher incidence of sunstrokes and the related deaths. And bear in mind also, this is the region that is primarily rural, on the same reason why they rely on farming and animal husbandry. And because of it being a rural dominated district area, the access to healthcare infrastructure and the amenities that are necessary to alleviate these problems, the density is very less, and also the accessibility is very poor. And that's the reason why the poor people, the ones of the lower sections of the society, they are disproportionately affected. If we look at the rest of the district from the coastal regions, there is also an ever-increasing propensity of the number of mandals being declared to be affected by heat waves. And here the temperature would be of the range of in excess of 35 and then 40, but these days we still see temperatures being recorded as 43, 44, and even at times 45. And in these regions, the primary economical activity for people living in the coastal area is through fisheries. And because of the rising sea levels as well, the fishermen are advised not to go for the fishing activity. And because of there is no state-sponsored insurance policies or the basic minimal income that is being provided for them to sustain a livelihood, they are being pushed into the situation of financial crisis. Now let's look at Telangana. Since it is a newly formed state, whatever data that has been available before it was bifurcated from Andhra, in the United Andhra Pradesh, it was used to predict how the temperatures would vary over the coming 30-40 years. And the situation doesn't look good. It is in fact quite bleak that the predicted rise in temperatures is in the range of at least 3 to 4 degrees. And the summer temperatures are soaring well in above 35 and 38 degrees, which for an interior region is quite high. And what this is doing is, like Andhra Pradesh, even Telangana, in most of the district, it is rurally dominated. And because of the rising temperatures, lack of the facilities for the people to treat themselves in case of any sunstroke induced health conditions, what they're trying to do in search of an economic occupation as well, they're increasingly moving towards the urban areas. And because of this, there is a high demand for the creation of the habitable regions, and which is leading to deforestation and thereby further exacerbating the already existing problems of temperature increase. Now let's look at Kerala, which is the southernmost state in the western coast of India. And what has been observed is that there is a steady increase in the annual temperature, not just of the summer, but the annual temperature is increasing by at least 1.5 degree and it is predicted to be in the range of 1.5 to 1.7 for Kerala. And also there is a rise in sea levels, and which leads to higher humidity. And as you know, higher humidity would mean that the perceptible temperature is higher. It feels much more hotter than what it actually is, and because of which it is leading to heat strokes, the summer related issues, health issues, and that is also displacing people from most of the coastal regions into the interior parts. And the ones who are living in the coastal regions, in the low-lying areas, who depend upon the fishing activity, they are now becoming unemployed, and also they are being pushed into the financial crisis. And what the prediction says for the period of 2050s and 2080s doesn't look very good, in that the temperature rise would be of the range of 3 to 4 degrees, which is already alarming. And as I've mentioned, it affects the poor population, and especially the ones in the low-lying areas and the coastal areas. And all this can be summed up with this one picture, where we now see that in these regions, Andhra, Telangana, and Kerala, the drought frequency in the past decade is more than 4 times in a given period of 10 years. And what it is leading to is that it is impacting close to 50 million people. The annual rainfall that is being received by these regions is decreasing. There is no economic activity, because most of these provinces, they rely on agricultural and animal husbandry, and the 68%, more than 2/3 of the area that is supposed to be cultivated doesn't really becoming productive. And because of the lack of drought management as well, the things are becoming exacerbated, and then there's no policy being made to alleviate the problem, or at least to manage the issue. And what we have on the right is actually the forecast for the next 30 years based on the data from 1970 until 2000s. And what it shows is that the drought frequency, what is already worse, what is already being experienced close to 4 times and more than 4 times in a decade, might actually go to 8 to 10 times, meaning that 80% of the time we will face a drought, and the area coverage is actually increasing, whether you simulate it for a 4-month average period or for a 12-month average period, based on the historical data and the current level of deforestation that is occurring. So now we have covered the summer season. Then let us look at the rainy season, how that is affecting it, because that situation is also not so good. And let's once again go back to Andhra Pradesh. The state receives bulk of its rainfall, the precipitation during the months of June, July, August, and September, and the retreating monsoon is the October and November. As the first speaker have mentioned, for the retreating monsoon to happen, we need to have a healthy Himalayan belt. But with them, with their temperature rising as well, they're not being able to provide that the turn signal for the monsoon to be directed towards these southern states. And because of that, during those months, there is a decrease in the precipitation, and more importantly, overall, when you consider the average rainfall that is received during a year, that is an overall drop, although it is not significant. But what is much more alarming is that the decrease or increase in the rainfall is very minimal, but the retreating monsoon, there is a significant impact that it is gone down, meaning that the state is receiving all the rainfall in a given few day period, meaning the state is not equipped with the resources to tackle that, and that is what is leading to increasing flood intensity and then the flood frequency as well. Here you see the Godavari basin, the region which is the one that accounts for the cash crop activity in Andhra Pradesh, majority of it, and you see that from the 1980s to 1999, and then you compare it with the last 20 years, it is always on the rise in most of the regions, whether it's the flood frequency or the intensity. And what is changing is that traditionally the regions that were low, that have experienced low flood frequency, they are increasingly becoming more flooded, and the intensity is also increasing. And these areas are not equipped with the infrastructure, so that is leading to the families being displaced, no economic activity, and obviously eventually people are being turned into poverty.
Sorry, Sri, for the intervening you. If you could kindly wrap up in
3 minutes I'll be done.
Sure.
So in Telangana it is the same, that the predictions are not good, that the average rainfall, the anomaly, the amount that is being received might be as less as 14 millimeters per day, not in a year. And that is the prediction for 50s, 80s, and whether it is in the interior regions or the higher north lying regions. And in Kerala, what has been the case is that the average precipitation that is observed in the last 20 years, and the prediction for the next 20 years, there would be a significant reduction, as much as 15 to 20%. But as I've said, although the number of days that are raining, is reduced, and the state is receiving all the rain within those few that time window, and that is primarily through the cyclones, which if you look at the Arabian Sea activity of cyclonic activity, it is increasing, ever increasing. And also more so the severe tropical thunderstorms and severe storms that has been increasing over the last 20 years in this region. And because of that, there is an increase in flooded area, and the cyclone frequency, as you can see from this graph, it is ever increasing. It used to be sporadic, but now it is consistent. We have a cyclone every year, and that is primarily because of the deforestation. And it is also the case with Andhra Pradesh, which is trying to be industrialized. Even Telangana, there is a flood event every year in one district or the other. And that is because of the deforestation once again, and then the human-induced activity. What I would like to present is that the duality of the Indian scenario in climate change. We have the areas that are traditionally drought prone becoming flooded. The traditionally areas that are becoming flooded are drought, and then that is in the rainy season that we are getting floods. But in the summer season, we are facing with heat waves and sunstroke related deaths. And this is something that we should all be aware of, and then should try to influence the policymakers to take action on. And with that, I conclude the presentation, and then I thank the Breakthrough Society for giving me this opportunity. And also, if you are interested in what we are doing, I kindly request you to join the society and then fight for a good cause. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sri, for such a nice and wonderful presentation. With that, let's have a big round of applause to all our panelists today for the very nice and wonderful presentation for different regions of India on the climate change aspects. Now, with that, we will start the question answer session For that, I would like to request Abhishek, who is a PhD student in the Technical University of Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark, and he is a member of BSS Abroad, and Devanus, who is a postdoctoral research scholar at IIT Madras, India, and a member of BSS Abroad, to conduct the session. The session is up to you, Abhishek and Devanus.
Thank you, Ankita, and many thanks to the different panelists who have been speaking about climate change. So without further ado, we are a bit late today. So let us start with the question answers. So we have been getting a lot of questions from the registrations. So I would like to start with a very simple question. So the question is that as a simple person, what minimal things that we can do to undo this effect of climate change? And before going to the answers, I urge you to write your questions in the Zoom chat box, or if you're watching on YouTube, then please write your questions in the comment section. So any of the panelists, if you can answer this question, please unmute yourself and who is going to answer? Boyu, do you want to talk about this, that as a simple person, what minimalistic changes you should do to avoid climate change? Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you, Devanuj.
Yeah, so any of the panelists, if you would like to answer the question that as a simple person, like what minimal things we can do to avoid the effect of climate change?
Maybe I'll try to answer. This is something that has already been implemented, if you know, especially in the IT regions or the people who work in IT parks. The employer requests them to try to carpool. So one of the things we can try, which will have a significant impact, is reduce our carbon footprint. And for that, reducing the vehicular usage might be one. Relying on the public transportation system would be another. And also making sure, if you go into other details, where we can reduce the plastic pollution by making sure that we don't buy plastic covers, we rely on the ones that are biodegradable. So yeah, these are things that comes to my mind. And also I think the rest of the panelists would have other suggestions as well.
Okay, anybody else want to add something to this? Okay, if not, so then let's move on to the next question. So yes.
Yes, I think there's a question in the chat box from someone whose name I cannot see clearly. If you want, you can unmute yourself and ask the question directly to the panelist. Or I can read it out. So I will read out the question which is there. How do you understand?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nimesh. So my question was, how do we understand the role of developed countries in climate change and the mitigation, like what we are trying to do in India with their help, or it's just India does by themselves? Like, because it's quite clear that industrial nations have done like a lot of damage. So is it like, what does speaker think about this?
Try to address this. So in my opinion, there is a ethical dilemma when we ask the poor nations to cut back on growth in order to for climate change, because in a way, yes, yes, growing also implies a higher carbon footprint, but it also helps bringing out millions out of poverty, out of living conditions which really have other mortal factors. So perhaps the more developed countries can bear the brunt a bit more, and they can maybe restrict their growth and allow the less developed countries to grow and offset. I mean, they can possibly they can possibly be the one who bear more of the hit to growth than the lesser developed countries. But yes, we would need the world to think as one for that, and that is not. It's a political challenge.
I think to add to that point, I think that was one of the goals of the Paris Climate Accord, that everyone will contribute to a global fund, and the more prosperous countries will contribute more to that fund, and the resources from that fund will be spent as needed and more on the developing countries, because any technological shift to reduce our carbon footprint requires a lot of investment as in investment capital, and a lot of investment in technology and different technological research, which is actually not possible for, if we call them third world countries. For third world countries, it's not possible for them to entirely invest on research and also invest on the technological progress to reduce the carbon footprint. So I think if everyone, as it was mentioned in the Paris Climate Accord, if everyone comes together and if everyone contributes equally or as they are capable of in maintaining a global fund and in addressing the climate change problem everywhere as a unified body, then I think some of these problems can be effectively handled.
So thanks, Mayuk. But as we all know that this specific questions has not been so linear, because the so-called first world countries have been using the resources for a longer time. They had an industrial boom previously, and this has been a matter of debate for a very long time. So therefore, I would like to request Professor Soumitra Banerjee if he can add his views on this. Is how these things can be tackled, or what is the probable solution of this?
Yeah, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, as you have already said, this is a hotly debated issue, because the countries that are known as advanced countries, they're advanced because they have used these energy resources for a longer time. They have had an industrial revolution. They have used coal and other fossil fuels for a longer time. And because of that, they are now prosperous. And now they are telling that the relatively less advanced countries should advance less, because now there is a climate change issue. That's not fair. And therefore, I feel the main bulwark of preventing a climate change lies on the relatively more advanced countries, especially those countries which had a colonial past, the ones that exploited other countries to increase their prosperity. So now, therefore, it cannot be equally borne by all countries. The ones that had a colonial past have to bear the main bulwark of preventing a climate change. That's in brief my opinion.
Thanks, Dr. Banerjee. So let us move on to the next question. I can see some people have raised their hands. So Manmat, if you can unmute yourself and pose your question.
Hi. Audible?
Yeah,
Can you
you're
hear me?
audible. Yeah.
Okay. So my question is regarding to the road pollution caused by cars and vehicles. So because one of the major contributor for the, apart from the industry, this is one of the major contributor all over the India. So does our Environmental Protection Agency or as a Breakthrough Science Society, could we make law more stringent to, like, stricter to prevent these kind of things? Or if the car manufacturers provide some better solution to reduce the air pollution, like releasing nitric oxide or the other sulfur related gases. So could someone help me to understand more better about this one? Because as I know, there are some carbon capture catalysts that utilize to reduce the pollution in, like, better car services or the car dealers they are providing us. So if someone able to answer this question, it would be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Manmat, for this nice question. Actually, it's a very hot field of research these days. I would like to ask the panelists, anyone they can answer this question. Ayush, do you have some views on this?
Not really. I mean, I would prefer to pass this question.
Okay. Professor Banerjee?
Yeah, all the difficult questions ultimately come to me. But on this, my point is that yes, the electric cars can in some way be seen as solutions, but they're not really solutions, in the sense that yes, on the point of use, at the point of use, they do not cause any pollution. But the electricity has to come from somewhere, and that is either produced by a coal-fired plant or a gas-fired plant or a hydroelectric plant or a nuclear plant. And all of these, in some way or other, pollute the environment, cause disturbance in the environment. So, my take on this question is that the real solution is in strengthening public transport. This is actually contrary to the way things have been going in the West. In the West, public transport is very weak. Why? Because by making public transport weak, they made a large market for cars, and that was needed for their economy. And that has led in turn to this climate problem. So now what needs to be done is to strengthen public transport so that people feel people do not need to use their private cars. So if from any place to any place, it is more convenient to go by public transport, who will use private cars? Because that is more expensive. So this is what we need to create. Unfortunately, this vision has been lacking in the state leaders, both in the West as well as in the East. So this is what really is needed on this particular issue. That's my thought.
Thanks again, Professor Banerjee.
Thank you.
I see Shivi has raised her hand. Shivi, can you unmute yourself and take your question?
Yes, sure. My question is that how much is the contribution from using air conditioners? And as we can experience that the outdoor unit of AC emits so much heat. So what happens to it, and will there be any positive change in climate? When not only households are also using AC, but also many research institutes are also using, and other places also. And if they start cutting down the time duration of using AC, will there be any positive change in climate? Thank you.
Okay, among the panelists, if any one of you want to answer this question, you can unmute. Pritam, if you want to add something can also join in. So, Komudi, do you want to answer this question?
Well, I can't elaborate much on it. Like, of course, like reducing air conditioner will produce less greenhouse gases, but like how to scale it properly, like feasibly, I'm not sure, because it requires a significant amount of, like on an individual level, it requires a significant amount of cutting, like lifestyle requirement, also for like industrial purpose or like lab that we do need to like maintain a particular temperature level. So like if someone can like talk about an efficient solution to it.
I can possibly add to this. So as a whole, while yes, an AC will have as much of a carbon footprint as much carbon is released in producing the energy that is required to run an AC, which is quite substantial, because the ACs at their peak consume about close to kilowatts of close to a kilowatt. I mean, a personal unit. But one thing that we can all cut on is that we usually set that AC at too low a temperature. I mean, we don't really need our rooms to be at 16 degrees, but our tendency is always to crank up the AC to its highest setting and cover ourselves with a blanket and enjoy the cold. So we could maybe try to be. I mean, this also helps us. I mean, we also have. It helps us in that our electricity is lighter on our electricity bill is lighter on the wallet if we, let's say, set the AC to 25, which I think is reasonable for everyone. And so yeah, this is something that we can all do at a personal level.
Okay.
So I also want to add something to this. The thing is that I don't think that like using ACs or other things do really contribute that much to climate change, because a major bulk of the greenhouse gas emissions comes from burning of fossil fuels, and that is at an industrial level. So individual people, like individuals like us, we can cut up on some things and we can maybe reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. But I think any activism or any change on a global level which is going to affect the reduction in emissions has to happen on an industrial level or in the industries where fossil fuels are burned at a huge scale, which kind of constitutes a major part of the emissions right now. So I think this entire agenda should be taken up on a global scale rather than on an individual scale. Like, I don't think like individual differences can make some change, but if we make a global change or if we make a system change, that is what effectively or finally is the solution to less emission of greenhouse gases.
Moyuk's line of reasoning is a little bit one-sided, because ACs contribute to climate change in two ways. One is the energy needed to run the AC comes from burning of fossil fuels. So what Moyuk is telling about the industrial fossil fuel burning, the industrial fossil fuel burning produces the electricity which is consumed by the AC. So less AC means less energy demand, less fossil fuel. And secondly, ACs are also, though in a very minor way, they also contribute to the pollution and climate change factor due to the hydrofluorocarbon. They are also greenhouse gases, and the ACs, the coolants, they are the fluorocarbons. So that way also ACs contribute, both this contribution though is very small.
Okay, Okay, yeah, that is true. That is definitely true. But the thing is that, like, if research is being made to foray into different areas of extracting,
the research should be the architectural design of the houses can be done much better so that the natural cooling can be utilized very much. And there is already some thoughts on these things, that how we can build houses which uses the natural air circulation for cooling and less dependence on ACs. So the major research should be that, in that direction as far as AC is concerned.
Okay.
Okay.
You have more climate-friendly design of houses.
Okay. We are a bit short on time, so I'm not going to take too many questions. But there was an interesting question that I would like to ask Professor Jubobjyoti Mukhopadhyay to answer. So the question is that there has been a lot of new climate-friendly technologies that has been developed by scientists, but we don't see really mass scale production of them or mass scale applications of them yet. So what is the thing that is hindering the really mass scale production or use of these new climate friendly technologies that are coming up?
No, this is related to the question which was asked earlier about the developing countries and developed countries. You see, if you go through the history of the climate change debate, in the very beginning, there was when the scientists were first discussing the role of carbon dioxide, the role of fossil fuel burning in causing climate change, there was a very strong lobby, particularly of the oil lobby, which was propagating that the climate change is a myth. There is no climate change at all, because they were contesting the very basis that the carbon dioxide emission, human carbon dioxide emission, is giving rise to global warming, because their profit would decrease. If the fossil fuel, if there is a restriction on fossil fuel burning, then their profit will become less. If there is any restriction on the mining of petroleum, you see the role of carbon dioxide, the role of different industries for contributing to the carbon dioxide emission. There are primarily, one is the energy production, the other is the transport. And the energy production was, in the earlier days, it was primarily from coal, and afterwards from oil and gas. And the transport is entirely on oil. So the climate-friendly technologies which the scientists suggested, if you want to, for example, like the catalytic converters, if you want to use catalytic converters in the vehicles, which would cause better burning and less pollution like that. So that would increase the cost of the vehicle, and that would reduce the profit of the owners, the industry owners would have to invest more in producing these cars. So the main reason why this is not being done is the profit-making motive of the industrial system that is operative in the capitalist countries. And almost all the countries in the world are running on the capitalist system, and profit is the main motive for production, and that profit motive of production is hindering the application of the climate-friendly technologies, because to introduce the climate-friendly technologies would reduce the profit of the industrialists, and in some cases, some polluting industrialists may have to even close down their industries. While we are discussing in this today, you discussed very well about the impact of the climate change, but there should be some discussion also on how we are going to face the effects of climate change, how humanity is going to face the effect of climate change, and whether as science activists we have any role to play. So to face the effect of the climate change, two concepts are there. One is the adaptation to the climate change. That is, there is, because of the human emission of carbon dioxide over the past 200 years, we have already caused some climate change, and which for the next few years at least, unless we do something drastic, this climate warming will gradually go on being. So what we are going to do so that we can adapt ourselves to the climate change which are already taking place and which is likely to take place in the near future. So the adaptation would mean that we should take various measures at the community level to let the people face the adverse effects of the climate change. For example, take the case of Sundarban. In the case of for Sundarban, what are the impacts of the climate change? We are getting more frequent storms, more frequent cyclones. We are facing floods, incursion of saline water into the agricultural fields and destruction of the crops. And we are also facing the inexorable rise of the sea level, which is threatening to erode the land, and gradually the sea is advancing landward. So what we can do to face these things, these impacts? We should have climate shelters. We should have the proper protections against the flooding of the rivers. We should invest in research so that we can have more salt-resistant crops which can be grown in the saline soil. So all these require additional investment of money. And the investment of money, it will be either from the governmental side or from the private corporate houses. Both the government and the corporate houses, they are unwilling to invest in these aspects, which does not lead to profit of the corporate houses. And whatever policies the government follows, that is to help the corporate houses, and it is not oriented towards what is beneficial for the people. I think that is the root of the problem. So breakthrough's role can be to make the people aware about the impact of the climate change. What can they do to adapt themselves to the climate change, and what is preventing such measures to be implemented? So the people, if we can make them aware, they themselves will raise the demand that these measures should be implemented by the industry and by the government. So breakthrough has a great role in building up this public awareness about the climate change, the impact of the climate change, and how they can face the climate change, the impact of the climate change, and so that they understand the scientific basis of that, and they can raise the demand to the government and to the industrial houses to implement those demands. So only a concerted, popular pressure, popular movement can force the government and the industry to adopt these climate-friendly technologies. That's how I view the topic.
Thank you, Professor Mukhopadhyay. This gives us quite a view on how on individual level we should act, or what are the causes of the climate changes, and how should we also increase awareness among the common masses. Due to the shortage of time, I have to conclude our question and answer session. Thanks to all our panelists, and thanks to Professor Banerjee and Professor Mukhopadhyay for giving us a good sight on climate change.
With that, thanks a lot, Abhishek and Devanuj, for conducting the question and answer session so well. Now we are at the very last part of our program. I would like to request Kunal. He is a postdoctoral research scholar at Catalonia Institute for Energy Research, Barcelona, Spain, and a member of the Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter, to conclude the program.
Thank you, Ankita. As we are at the final stage of today's program, it is indeed my pleasure to thank our panelists, Mr. Mainak Mandal, Mr. Ayush Dey, Mr. Mayuk Rai Chaudhary, Mr. Kaumudi Vikash Goswami, Mr. Srivatsava Viswananda, Professor Dhrubajyoti Mukhopadhyay, and Professor Saumitra Banerjee for taking out time today and sharing their views. Big thanks to our audience as well for joining us and making today's session very interactive with stimulating discussions. We hope that through these discussions, we all have learned a lot, and now we shall spread this knowledge to others so that more and more people will get to know about the critical state of climate in different regions of India. In addition to this, I would also like to appeal to all our audience to become a part of our efforts to save climate and environment, along with science, education, and research and scientific temperament in our Indian society by becoming a member of Breakthrough Science Society. All the relevant details on how to become a member are available on our website. Finally, once again, on behalf of the Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter, I thank all our speakers, our audience, and our organizers for making this discussion successful. With this, we close the program today. Thank you very much and have a great weekend ahead. Thank you.